Well, welcome and greetings. Jonathan Foust here. Thank you for making your way to this live stream. Boy, this is going to be an archive talk coming up, but I'd like to do a little opening meditation and offer a little introduction to it. I have managed to get COVID. I was traveling and getting wound down, and boom, I got whacked. So no time to do a fresh talk this week, although I selected one which I think will be somewhat apropos to these challenging times we're going through right now. I hope you are faring well. Before we launch, first of all, a big thank you to Rita Moran, our mindful movement leader. You can join her at 6:30 Eastern Standard Time. That link for her Zoom class is on my website and on my Facebook page. Also, a big thank you to the Insight Meditation Community of Washington for streaming this, to Glenn Harrison, our producer, for all the technical work to get this out to you. Boy, I ain't got brain fog, I have to admit. This class is all offered freely, so no one's denied access. Your support helps keep it rolling out there. I've got a newsletter which I have not sent out in a long time, but I will get one out shortly. You can sign up for that as well. And I do have a day-long retreat scheduled for January 11th, the annual Begin Your Year with Mindful Intention retreat. So just planting that seed in case you're interested. It's really good to have you here. I will do my best not to cough during this short meditation. If you like, you can close your eyes. You might like to just sense in any way your body would like to move. Maybe to reach your arms up overhead, or just to let your body sway a little bit from side to side. And just sense what it's like to begin to shift your attention inward. As you feel your breath, you might explore what it's like to soften your exhalation. That is to say, to consciously relax, to let go, to release, as you feel the breath flowing out of your body. And as you relax, noticing how perhaps the more you soften, the more you relax, the more you feel, the more aware you become of the subtlety of life force, of pulse, of tingling, of vibration, of subtle energies. And you may notice how the more you're aware of tingling and pulse and vibration, the more you're also aware of that which is aware. You might like to consciously now and willfully slow down your breath, perhaps breathing in to the count of 4, exhaling to the count of 4, riding the breath willfully as you breathe in and as you breathe out, and using this as a tool for gathering your attention. And for the next minute, just exploring the following question. How intimately can you feel the breath on the inside? When you notice your mind wandering, is it possible just to begin again without any judgment? Now, over the next 3 rounds of breath, feel the exhalation, feel the inhalation, and in particular, feel the space between the breaths. And then drop all control of the breath and explore if it's possible to maintain your awareness of the breath, but without any willful effort. That is to say, the breath is free-flowing and absolutely effortless. As I breathe in, I'm aware of breathing in. As I breathe out, I am aware of breathing out. You might notice now where you feel the breath the most predominant. Perhaps the nostrils, maybe at the septum, perhaps in the belly, or you may have a sense of the whole body, the whole of the breath as you breathe. And right wherever you feel the breath the most predominant, is it possible to soften, relax, and find any new sensations here? Part of the key in practice is exploring 2 qualities that can occur simultaneously, almost paradoxically. One is concentration. That's paying attention on purpose. The second is deep relaxation. As you feel the breath in the foreground, is it possible to relax the muscles of your face? To feel the inside of the mouth? To relax the lips? To relax and to feel the weight of your tongue? As you feel the breath in the foreground, is it possible to feel or imagine the weight of your arms? Sensing down from the shoulders down through your elbows. And down through your wrists. to relax and feel the backs of the hands. And the volume of your palms. The thumbs and the fingers. As you feel the breath in the foreground, is it possible to soften the belly? The lower back and the buttocks. The floor of the pelvis and the hip joints. As you feel the breath in the foreground, is it possible to feel or imagine the weight and the volume of your legs? The hip joints down through the knees. The knees down through the ankles. The tops of the feet and the toes. The soles of the feet and the heels. Is there anything that could relax right now? Anything that could soften inside? And can you feel this balance of focus and at the same time deep relaxation? As I breathe in, I'm aware of breathing in. As I breathe out, I'm aware of breathing out. And you might explore now, letting go of doing, letting go of effort, and to shift your attention to this sense of being, of resting in presence, of allowing everything to be just as it is. As you relax and feel and allow, what do you feel inside? What do you notice? You might very gently now let your breath deepen and just sense what is present right now. If you could find a word or two that describes your experience, what would those words be right now? And you might very gently let your breath deepen. Let your body begin to move in any way that feels good for you as you gently begin your transition. Welcome back. Having lived in the third world for a couple of years, I've had the experience of some pretty exotic diseases. And I think the number one experience I've had in terms of exotic diseases is COVID, which I'm still recovering from. This really, really laid me low. And it became this question of surrendering to it and trying to stay focused on what was most important as I was laid so low, which is really the theme of this next talk. Part of my COVID experience, of course, was going through the election and all the disappointments, and it becomes this question around what now? What is this balance of resilience and focus, and also surrendering to reality? So I didn't have the firepower to write a fresh talk for this week, but I did go through the archives. And this talk is on the balance of resilience and surrender, which I think may be apropos to these days and these weeks and years coming up. It's really around the balance of skillful focus and skillful surrender. I hope you find this helpful, and so many blessings in your practice and in all the ways you serve in this world. Enjoy. I grew up in the Pennsylvania Dutch country in southeastern Pennsylvania. And my elementary school was pretty small. I think there were like 24, 28 kids in my class. And many of the kids in my class, most of them were farm kids. And many were Amish or Mennonite. And I remember a few of them didn't speak English. They spoke only German at home. Pennsylvania Dutch is actually Pennsylvania Deutsch. Deutsch is German. And all of my teachers in my elementary school were from the area, and they spoke German as well, so they would sometimes translate for the kids. This was a very provincial school, and most of the teachers and most of the kids were the product of hardworking, pious farm people. And as I recall, they were pretty grim, very, very disciplined. I mean, old school discipline. It's kind of, I remember being shocked once. I think it was in 5th or 6th grade, when one of my classmates was acting up a little bit, and the teacher drew a little circle on the blackboard, and he had to keep his nose inside the circle. I was so terrified by that. Pretty much what I got out of my educational experience was how to be on time, how to be organized, how to stand in a straight line without complaining, and how to avoid punishment. One of their favorite stories, which is told again and again, was the story of the ant and the grasshopper. And you may know this one, but I'll read it to you. In a field one summer's day, a grasshopper was hopping about, chirping and singing to its heart's content. An ant passed by, bearing along with great toil an ear of corn he was taking to the nest. "Why not come and chat with me," said the grasshopper, "instead of toiling and moiling that way?" "I am helping to lay up food for the winter," said the ant, "and recommend you do the same." "Why bother about winter?" said the grasshopper. "We've got plenty of food at present." But the ant went on its way and continued its toil. When the winter came, the grasshopper had no food and found itself dying of hunger, while it saw the ants distributing every day corn and grain from the stores they had collected in the summer. Then the grasshopper knew it's best to prepare for days of need. I remember so clearly hearing that story. And the message was very clear, and I remember it. I am going to be the ant. I'm not going to be that hipster, commie, flower child grasshopper. Of course, I did kind of become the hipster, commie, flower child grasshopper, but the lesson of the ant was never far from my mind. We are taught that to make it in life, we have to be diligent, we have to work hard, and we have to get ahead of others because they're going to take it away from us. And there's some comfort in that. If you work hard, you're going to be okay, you're going to be safe. But, it may not be the complete expression of human life. I'd like to talk about this whole idea of making your life happen through effort versus letting your life be through resting in presence. I'll talk a little bit about the case for effort and willpower and making it happen, and some thoughts on skillful effort, and then talk about the case for non-effort, for allowing and for surrender, and some thoughts on non-effort. I've got a good friend who is one of the most willful people I've ever met in his life. He's been a corporate leader. He started businesses. And at one point, he was starting a business and needed to raise money. He raised a bunch of money, but he was kind of burning through his capital. And one of his investors told him they didn't think the numbers were there and they were not going to fund the next round. If they pulled out, it meant his whole business was going under. And he told me how he put everything, he put his own money into this business because he believed in it so much. And without this investor, he wasn't going to make it. He couldn't sleep. He was devastated. And he just woke up in the middle of the night and said to himself, I'm not accepting this. I'm not taking no for an answer. So in the morning, he sent an email to his friend, I'm coming to see you. Email came back saying, I'm busy. He emailed back saying, that's okay, I'll wait. He made an appointment. The secretary said he's busy all day. He said, I'm coming anyway. And he sat in the waiting room, got there in the very, very beginning of the day. And this investor showed up at the door. He said, really? He just looked at him and said, really? And my friend said, really? So an hour and a half later, they met. And at one point, my friend said he knew this investor over the years, so that they had somewhat of a friendship. But he actually had his friend, this investment, banker, he had him in a headlock. And he said, you do not understand. I am not going to fail. His friend said, look, we've seen this a dozen times. You're not going to hit your metrics. It's not going to work. My friend said, this will be the first time in your career it's going to work. I want $100,000. The investment banker said $25,000. He said $50,000. And he walked out of there with funding for the next round. I can't imagine that kind of sheer chutzpah. But he got the funding. And that got him for another 8 months. And during that time, he had built up a fair bit of capital, and the company was really worth something. He thought he had it sold. And he was told twice that it was sold. The paperwork was coming, but there were stumbling blocks. A new CEO of a company was going to buy them, needed more time to look at it. And he was stretched again to the end. And he was laying people off, telling people, I'll pay you back when I get more money. And again, just stuck. And I asked him about this, and he said, when everything's on the line, you don't know how, but you just keep trying. You don't know how it's going to come together. All you know is that you don't know, and that's what keeps you going. And so he carried on, and he went through so much. And I'll tell you a little bit about kind of what happened a little bit later in this talk. He needed another $500,000, and he was stuck. He couldn't get that last little bit. And I'll tell you what happened in just a bit. But when you think about this, How many times in your life have you really, really wanted something? It might be completing school or getting a degree or finishing a project, working through a challenge in your relationship and having a breakthrough. Do you remember what it's like to give up everything or give up a lot? Did you notice the sacrifice that goes into pursuing what really, really calls you? And there's an interesting thing of how, have you noticed how the satisfaction you have in getting something tends to be equal to the sacrifice? It's when you've given it your all and you have that breakthrough of achieving something so deeply satisfying. And this is all about making things happen in the world, but it's also about waking up to reality, to spiritual practice. When we start off on this journey of mindfulness or enlightenment, whatever you want to call it, it's always good to look at the roadmap. What are the best practices? Get some guidance. What are the roads to avoid, the best places to rest along the way so you can stay focused? You take a look at role models. Who has done this before and done it well? Who's doing it now? You build resilience. It's this practice of engaging with total focus. This summer, I spent some time hanging out on the beach, which was kind of fun. I am not good at ball sports and paddles. I have progressive lenses, so when I can watch the ball go from clear to fuzzy, through my glasses. But I was invited to play some with a paddle and ball on the beach, and I didn't want to play because I'm not good at it. But the invitation was there. I thought, okay, go ahead. And here's how you hold the paddle. And I just missed wildly in the beginning, but then I watched my nervous system start to figure out how it worked. We actually had a few rallies, and I actually started really, really having fun, diving for the ball on the sand and stuff like that. And what I found was I went from really, really, really bad. And after about an hour of playing and practice and effort, I went from really, really, really bad to just bad. But I had a blast. It was really, really fun. And this is an important part of life and practice. It's focus and resilience. It's that keeping going. You just keep going. You look for improvement. You find others who are better than you at something and hang out with them. And success comes from this. Of course, there's a shadow side to this. That is, if you're not clear what you really, really want, you can be chasing some phantom ideas of what's going to make you happier. You can sort of like hack your systems to go faster and faster and faster, but if you're not going faster toward what you really want, then, things get a little bit dissatisfying, to say the least. And there's so many stories of people at the end of their life realizing they weren't true to themselves, that they were chasing something that wasn't aligned with their highest purpose. So this points to some kind of balance. We've got to figure out some kind of balance. So when you really, really want something, how do you find that balance? And I can't think of a better story than this story of a 544-mile ultra endurance race. This guy named Cliff Young, he entered the endurance race, and elite athletes from all over the globe showed up for this race. Cliff Young showed up wearing rubber boots. So let me read you this story because it's pretty outrageous. This is called the Tortoise and the Hares, the Cliff Young story. 10 years ago, the world lost one of the greatest long-distance runners of the 20th century. And no, he's not from Kenya. His name was Cliff Young. He was from Australia, and he was really, really, really old. Cliff Young's story is unique. While most athletes achieve success in the prime of their lives, their late teens, 20s, and even 30s, Young didn't gain notoriety until his early 60s. So if he was dominating ultramarathons at that age, just imagine what he could have accomplished if he decided to play old people games like shuffleboard, bingo, or badminton. He would have destroyed those noobs. Cliff grew up on a 2,000-acre sheep farm in Australia with almost 2,000 sheep. For you math majors out there, that's an acre per sheep. However, don't think for 1 second that he rode around in a fancy four-wheeler rounding them up. No way. Cliff spent the better part of his growing up years literally running down sheep on foot. I reckoned it was the easiest method, Cliff said. You know, kind of like how it's easier to climb up the mountain when you go skiing instead of spending $50 on a lift ticket. In 1983, at 61 years old, Cliff Young entered the Westfield Sydney to Melbourne Ultra Marathon, a 544-mile race from Sydney to Melbourne. These races normally take days to finish. Try running a normal marathon 20 times in a row, and then come talk to Cliff Young about how awesome you are. He'll just say, "Crikey," and then laugh in your face. Yeah, and don't think for 1 minute that this old codger would be satisfied with just finishing this ultramarathon. He's in it to win it. After months of preparation, all the other runners showed up in their fancy running gear and top-of-the-line running shoes. Within this group of runners stood one man that didn't fit the mold of the other 150 competitors. He wasn't swagged out with an Adidas tracksuit and the newest Nikes. No. Cliff Young showed up to the race wearing a pair of overalls and Wellington boots, a staple of hunting and outdoor wear for British aristocracy in the early 19th century. Folks thought this was nothing more than a publicity stunt gone wrong. The officials at the race almost didn't let Cliff compete because Young didn't have any sponsors. They told him he was crazy and he could never even finish. Cliff explained, "Sometimes I would have to run these sheep for 2 or 3 days. It took a long time, but I'd catch them. I believe I can run this race. It's only 2 more days. 5 days, I've run sheep for 3. They eventually let Cliff run. As the race began, the runners left Cliff sucking on their dust. Spectators even smirked because he didn't even run properly. He appeared to run leisurely, shuffling like an amateur. This style of running became known as the Young Shuffle. And yes, it kind of looks like someone who's trying to make it to the bathroom without having an accident. All the professional runners trained to run 18 hours a day and sleep for the remaining 6. Cliff had his own agenda. He ran all through the night. As the morning of the second day passed, everyone was surprised. Not only was Cliff still in the race, but he had continued to jog through the night. Seriously, if my grandparents aren't in bed by 8 p.m., they act like they just ran a marathon. And as the days passed, Cliff crept closer to the world-class runners. By the 5th and final night of the race, he had surpassed all the other athletes. He was the first competitor to cross the finish line with a record-setting time, 5 days, 15 hours, and 4 minutes. Cliff received $10,000 for winning the race, but he didn't keep a cent. He gave the other 5 runners, who finished $2,000 each, which further endeared him to all of Australia. It was also a gigantic FU to all the haters who doubted him. They tried to make it up by naming a street after him. A street? Nice try. Name the longest freeway in Australia after him, and then we'll talk. For the next 20 years of his life, Cliff continued to be an inspiration to all. He passed away on November 2nd, 2003 at the age of 81, but I'm pretty sure at that age he could still dominate most people at running. It's like when Cobra Kai tried to step to Mr. Miyagi at the Halloween dance in Karate Kid. Young had remained single through his life, but after the 1983 race at 62 years of age, he married a 23-year-old Mary Howell, Because of course he did. So, I love that story because it speaks to a suggestion of balance. When you focus, you move toward whatever you're paying attention to. But if you focus without awareness, it can be limiting. So Cliff Young found this balance of focused and yet easy. And that's a little bit of what we're talking about here. So I'd like to guide you in this short practice, just for a few minutes, just to kind of taste this a little bit. If you like, you can close your eyes and you might gently slow down your breath. Let's take a few moments to explore this element of willful focus practice and contrast that with other possibilities. You might, if you like, let your body become perfectly still. So still that you're not moving any unnecessary muscles. And if you like, you might let your primary attention be on your breathing. Where do you feel the breath on the inside? You might find it helpful to sharpen your attention by, again, letting your body be perfectly still, but you might count your breath, count the inhalations from 1 to 5. Exploring this question: is the length of this next inhalation any different than the length of the inhalation preceding? How narrow can you bring your attention to the feeling on the inside, the feeling of the breath? Perfectly still. If your mind wanders, guide it back immediately. And now you might sense, can you invite in a deepening sense of relaxation? Could you soften on the out-breath? Maintaining your focus, but at the same time, opening more into a sense of ease. Notice the effect. And now, let go of the anchor of breath And simply relax and feel and allow. Relax, feel, and allow. And if you like, you might gently deepen your breath. And feel free to remain with your eyes closed, or if you like, you can open your eyes. And did you feel a shift over those minutes? This sense of tightening focus can be very, very powerful. But it can also get grim. When we're under threat, we become hypervigilant. We can't rest. If you ever run a race, you're so aware of the competition that you can't really focus. If you can't rest, you can also build up a sense of unease. However, focus and concentration and making it happen does do a number of things in meditation. It does calm the nervous system when you truly arrive in the here and now at the point of your focus. It also cultivates the sense of the observer. What arises out of this tight focus is a kind of a sense of what it is that's aware. And it can also begin to demonstrate your relationship to what's happening. So power, resilience, focus, it has a place in life, and it has a place in meditation as well. But just as Cliff Young kind of found that balance of doing the Cliff Young shuffle and finding a way of moving slowly and with ease and relaxing in his experience, we can do the same thing. My friend, who did everything he could to make his deal happen, who poured himself into focusing on bringing in the money, came to what he thought was the end. He needed $500,000. He was $38,000 short. One of the investors said, I'll give you 200, but only if you come up with the other 300. I could not handle this level of stress. The numbers make no sense to me. But right at the end, one of the board members says, let's go to dinner. I'm having dinner with my college roommate, and maybe you can tell him what you're doing. And my friend said, it's over, it's done. I just want to drink myself into oblivion and start a new life tomorrow, but sure. So he went to dinner and he met his friend and told him what he was doing and how he'd fallen short. And this guy's college roommate said, how much do you need? He said, I need $38,000. And he said, oh, I can do that. And he thought to himself, God, why did you put me through this? And then he realized that this was really kind of a balance of effort and grace, kind of a combination of the two. If you've ever noticed how the luckiest people are the people who work the hardest, you put in effort and you kind of wait for grace. Grace may not come, my friend said, but it might. And my friend, who's also a meditation practitioner, said, this is the Dharma in action. We give ourselves fully. We release attachment to the outcome. And sometimes grace happens. And I'm sure if you've done any meditation, you know what it's like. You have some meditations where your mind is just kind of out of control, and then you shift in this beautiful sense of ease, a beautiful sense of allowing. And this brings in another aspect of meditation. Rather than just focusing on the breath tight and grim, rather than being being the ant, we can explore what it's like to allow. And Tara tells this story a lot, but I can't think of a better one. When pilots were exploring the upper limits of high altitude flying higher than anyone had ever flown before, a number of pilots died trying to control the pitch at that level of altitude. One pilot who went to the same height survived. Somehow he came out of this high altitude pitch and made it. And here's why he survived. He was knocked unconscious. And when he was unconscious, he let go of the stick and the plane righted itself. He let go of the tiller. And the plane found its own balance. So the instruction after that became, when you are in high altitude flying and you're losing control, let go of the tiller. Let the plane find its own balance. This becomes a really interesting exploration. How much in your life is it helpful to focus on resilience and focus and stamina and grit? How much of life is informed by allowing and letting be and receiving? A meditation that can be really kind of juicy is kind of the big sky meditation. I find it interesting how many techniques come out of sort of like different geographical locations. A lot of the practices from Southeast Asia, in forests and jungles, are much more internal. While the big sky meditation traditionally comes from the high mountains of Tibet. And the classic story, which you may know of, is the story of, who was it? It's just slipped out of my mind. Chogyam Rinpoche at Naropa. In one of the classes at Naropa Institute on a newsprint, he put up a little V. And he said, "What is this?" And someone said, "It's a bird." I said, "No, it's the sky with a bird flying through it." The idea in this meditation is opening to spaciousness. So you might, if you like, we're going to take just a few minutes here as our time is passing quickly. You can close your eyes. And again, slow down the breath. Allow yourself to relax on the out-breath. You might imagine yourself sitting on the peak of a mountain with nothing but sky above you. And imagine in this sky the rising sun, the setting sun, nighttime, weather systems. And imagine, if you would, that you could open your awareness so fully that you could expand your attention in all directions out beyond the furthest star. You might imagine that the sensations in your body are like stars in the sky as well, and feel the space inside and the space outside. And imagine, if you wish, that this perception of space is utterly effortless. And you may notice how things arise, things change, things fall away, and yet who you are is this vast open awareness. You might gently deepen the breath and just sense anything that may have shifted in these last few minutes. If you like, you can open your eyes or feel free to remain with them closed. I'm curious if you felt some kind of a shift. Don't bother raising your hand, I can't see you. You may have felt some kind of expansion. In Big Sky meditation, you are not focused on the bird, you're focused on the sky. And you may have noticed that while that was expansive, you may have gotten a little bit spaced out. And this is an important point. Just as focusing too tight makes you grim, focusing too open can be a little bit like being a sailboat without a rudder. You're just utterly rudderless, without awareness. And the important point here is that perhaps there's a sense of balance here. One aspect of the path is about gathering. One aspect of the path is about monitoring what arises. One aspect of the path is open allowing. And it's all inclusive. They're all interconnected. When we explore these practices of resting in presence, the practices of non-doing, it can feel kind of conceptual. If you've read non-dual teachers, I find that sometimes it's a bit of a struggle. It kind of makes sense, but then how do you do it? And I think what happens is we get these glimpses of effortless awareness. And I find for myself that part of the balance is the balance of building resilience and focus, and the balance of pausing and allowing and simply letting things be. You know, as I was thinking about this talk, I wasn't sure what angle to take on this. Balancing will and surrender, how can I help bring this a little bit more alive? And I decided to meditate. And meditation can be a really wonderful creative process. And then out of the blue, a number of little ideas popped in for this talk. Whether they were helpful or not is another question. But there's something about just the softening and the receiving. And I find this so interesting. The skillful sense of opening and allowing, the whole practice of inquiry, which I'll be talking about sometime soon down the road. This is really the anatomy of an insight. It's the difference between trying to figure something out and the willingness to be more familiar with it and to let consciousness open up around it. It's the nature of intuition, the nature of insight. You can't make it happen, but you can create the most optimal environment that you can. So this sense of being and resting in presence opens us up to creativity. Because when you open your attention to the space beyond the furthest stars, and you open to that sense of effortless being, that's when ideas flow. That's when consciousness flows, because the sense of a tightly bound sense of I and mine gets a little more permeable. It just begins to fall away. And so I bring this a lot to in my own life to my creative ventures. I've been doing a daily cartoon for a couple of years, and I just sit there with a blank page, and then just there's something about that process of just waiting for something to happen. What am I going to discover? When I can pause before making a phone call and ask myself, what's the most important thing here? That sense of open, allowing, listening is so powerful. When I'm talking to someone, to simply ask, what does this person really need or want right now? Pause and listen. The freedom comes in letting go. But the balance is finding that right amount of doing, the right amount of effort that brings you into the here and now, so that you can begin to access mindfulness. You can begin to access preferenceless awareness. You can begin to create the space for the heart and mind and consciousness to flow. When you begin to realize in meditation that you're not your thoughts, who you are is the awareness of the thinking process. You start to sense who you are as the one who is aware. So, being raised a Quaker, we had this great phrase that said, don't just do something, sit there. And it opens up some really interesting possibilities. Different traditions will tell you different things. You should focus, develop concentration. Other traditions focus more on this sense of being the objective observer, the witness. Other traditions focus more on the heart, on compassion, on love, on surrender, on devotion. Others focus more on having a clear intellectual understanding of the map. Others focus more on focusing resiliently on who is it that's aware. It's all part of the practice. And why I find more and more in my own practice and more as I sit with people, to trust yourself. Engage fully into your practice. There's tremendous power in using focus and concentration to gather your attention in the here and now. There's tremendous power in learning how to be the observer of what's changing. There's tremendous power on calling on your investigative powers in meditation to really explore what actually is happening. How does it want you to be with it? There's tremendous power in opening your heart consciously through the heart practices. And there's tremendous power in surrender. But this middle way that is often referred to in this practice, this middle way of not too tight, not too loose, is a constantly moving target. And I truly believe that what we're left with at any given moment is, what is happening right now? How does this moment want you to be with it? So if you like, in these remaining few precious minutes, let's close with a short meditation. You might sense the breath. Notice where you feel the breath right now. Notice if you could relax or soften. And just take the next 3 breaths to explore how intimately you can feel them on the inside. You might sense this presence of the observer or the witness, non-judging, without preferences, awake to what's changing. And you might sense as well this quality of allowing, of spaciousness. And you might explore these two questions. Right now, what is your experience? Can you name it in a word or two? And right now, is there a sense of how this moment is wanting you to be with it? As you're ready now, you might gently deepen your breath. As you're ready, you can open your eyes. Thank you so much for your time and attention. These practices get kind of complex and messy. I hope this was helpful, and I look forward to sharing more down the road. Many blessings, and I'll see you soon.